Morning and welcome to Season A, the platform where we speak truth to power. This is about the Senate leadership. The minority majority leaders emerge. Just watch what's happening in the Senate. It's all, cloaked in secrecy and things and their disagreements and everything else. I think that's Senator Abu you see in the background, I think. Anyway, let's hear what they have to say. We're just reporting what's happening. What are your views on it? Here we go. This is by Channels News. Let's watch this.
It's back to work for these senators who are resuming after a 2-week recess to allow them settle down for the task ahead. They had gone on a break a day after the inauguration of a 10th Assembly. The day in the Red Chamber begins with the President of the Senate, Godswill Akpabio, announcing the names of principal officers from the majority All Progressives Congress, who he says emerged by consensus.
APC, the All Progressive Congress, caucus of the Senate, after due consultations, have emerged with their leadership, which will be the fulcrum of commencing other businesses in the chambers. So I'm happy to announce that by consensus, the Senate leader is Senator Opeyemi Bamidele. He will be the majority leader of the Senate and the Senate leader. Senator Mohammed Ali Ndume will be the chief whip of the 10th Senate. Senator David Umahi, by your consent, will act as the deputy leader, and Senator Oyorola Isha Ashiru will be the deputy chief whip.
He's ready to announce the names of the principal officers from the minority parties. But it appears some senators want further discussions on this matter, prompting the Senate President to call for an executive session.
So we'll go for a 10 minutes closed session before further announcement.
See, cloaked in secrecy. It doesn't have to be cloaked in secrecy if we are really trying to talk about good governance here, but it's all machinations, in my opinion. Anyway, what's your view on it? Have a listen.
Less than 30 minutes later, the session ends. Plenary resumes, and the Senate President makes an announcement.
Majority of members of the minority caucus of the Senate, made up of about 7 political parties, have come up with their leadership. So I will just proceed to announce. Senator Simon Davor Nwakwom, minority leader. Distinguished Senator Oyewumi Olarere, deputy minority leader. Distinguished Senator Darlington Wokocha, minority whip. Distinguished Senator Rufai Hanga, deputy minority whip.
Curiously, all principal officers in the minority leadership are all former lawmakers in the House of Representatives and none from the Senate. But the emergence of the principal officers from the minority appears to have ruffled the feathers of some senators from minority parties.
Of the Federal Republic and of Nigeria on a minority party, and a minority leader has emerged without even sending me a text message that I'm seeking for your vote or your concurrence, support to be a minority leader. What type of parties are we having in PDP? We have 36 out of the 50 senators that are in the minority caucus. And then we cannot even come together and agree who should lead us.
The position that went to Senator Hanga should have gone to somebody out of from the minority from a different state, so as to continue to balance, because the Deputy Senate presidency is already in Kano.
Now that the positions of the principal officers of the Senate have been filled, the next task before the upper chamber is to name its special and standing committees, as well as the leaders and members of these committees.
Beg your pardon. Let's see what's happened there. 1 second. So I think we're going to just hear from channels about this as
It's a
well.
roll call of what Lady just reported. The Senate leader, Okwayemi Bamidele, Deputy Senate Leader, Senator Dave Umahi, Chief Whip, Alain Dume, Deputy Chief Whip,
That name,
Lola
Alain
Ashiru,
Dume.
Minority Leader, Simon Devo Mwacom, Deputy Minority Leader, Oyewumi Olarere, Minority Whip.
So let's look at the faces. Bamidele, Senate Leader, Senator Bamidele, Senate Leader, then Senator Dave Umahi, Deputy Senate Leader, and Senator Alain Dume, is the Chief Whip, and the Deputy Senator Lola Ashiru is the Deputy Chief Whip. So anyway, so let's carry on.
Darlington Walker-Cha, and Deputy Minority Whip is Rufai Hanga. So that's a roll call of some of the names that the President of the Senate did announce, as you saw in that report put together by Linda. But for the principal officers in the House of Representatives, you've got the Majority Leader,
the one behind
Julius
my head here.
Nyabare,
You won't see it.
Deputy Majority Leader, Halims Abdullahi,
I'll just quickly
Chief
do
Whip,
this so you can see
Bello
it.
Kumo,
Just
Deputy
see it.
Chief Whip, Adeomi Ononuga, Minority Leader, Kingsley Chinda, Deputy Minority Leader, Aliyah Madiki, Minority Whip, Ali Issa, and Deputy Minority Whip, George Ibizimawa. So those are the names of the principal officers there. But shortly after that, the chairman of the All Progressives Congress, Blair Damu, did speak, and as you also saw us highlight in that opening this morning in the dailies, he flatly rejects that list, saying,
See?
what you just saw, he treats it as a rumor. He says the list of those principal officers announced by the leadership of the two chambers of National Assembly is unacceptable.
Wow.
He said there's a convention, there's a procedure supposed to have been selected from the Secretariat, but it didn't come from the Secretariat, and as such, he considers it as a rumor. So those are some of the undercurrents of what is going on. But joining us this morning to
let's
talk
discuss that
about
a
some
little
of
bit
these matters here in the studio is Senator Bassi. He joins us virtually today. Senator Gershom
let's
Bassi
look
is a
into
member
this.
of the 8th and 9th Senate. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today.
Yeah, Chamberlain.
Okay, so you're not new to this kind of developments in the Senate. So just go ahead and tell us what your impression is of all of what you've seen playing out in the Senate for a start.
Well, the National Assembly and the Senate in particular has a mind of its own. And normally there are attempts to influence the goings-on in the Senate. But from my experience, the Senate is its own, has a mind of its own. And what usually happens is that the Senate works closely with the party or whichever parties are interested. And that is how they reach some kind of understanding. But primarily, it is the Senate that takes the lead. So in this case, I think the Senate is in order. I think they have taken the lead. They have elected or nominated their principal officers, and that's in order. In the case of the majority party, I think that they have done well. They have very qualified people and experienced ranking senators in office. The slight concern is probably in the case of the minority parties, where some of the leadership are all new senators, but they're also experienced legislators. So even though they are new, they have rank.
Okay.
So they should be able to do the work.
All
You
right.
know, when they, yeah, okay.
Before we go on to, further take a look at these key persons and who they are, a little bit of the background and the import of their appointments, the chairman of the party did say, look, he received the president of the Senate, the deputy president of the Senate, then the next day he received the speaker and the deputy speaker. And then you'd have thought that, all right, probably ahead of the announcement of the resumption, they might be working together. Only for him to come up and say, no, this list didn't come from us, so this is unacceptable. What becomes of this list? I mean, what is the implication of his position, his stance on this announcement? Does it change anything?
Like I said before, the Senate takes the lead. And normally what the Senate president announces is what subsists. It's very difficult for outsiders to come in and tell the Senate how to run their business. Normally, out of courtesy and out of convention, the Senate would carry the party along. And it's a handshake, so both but in this case, there's really not much anybody outside of the Senate can do. They can put pressure, they can complain, but I think primarily it is what the senators decide that will take precedence.
So yes, go ahead.
So it's an internal matter of the APC, and I think the APC will have to find a way to resolve it internally.
But then looking at the list of both the minority and probably the majority leaders, but if you go first with those of the minority leaders who were announced and excuse me, and how, yes, they have some legislative experience, but from the House, a lot of those who are appointed, who are announced, and then they are not exactly rankings and first-timers in the Senate, as it was. So is there any significance? You think this must have been carefully thought out before this announcement was made?
Well, as you have reported, channels has reported, there was a closed session before this announcement. So clearly, if there was a closed session, then my thinking, or from my experience, it means that there were issues to be resolved in the closed session. So the idea of it being carefully thought out, I'm not sure that would actually apply here because they went into closed session. With regards, do you want me to talk about their experience or?
Yes, please.
Well, with regards to their experience for the minority, I think if you look at our rules, clearly the senator who is the Senate minority leader has rank because there are two planks on which you have rank. One is a repeating senator, and two is coming from the House of Reps. So he's coming from the House of Reps, and therefore he has rank, and so he's qualified to be a minority leader. You recall that in the 8th Assembly, we had the current Senate president as minority leader, even though he was a first-time legislator. So when it comes to the principal officers, the idea of rank is really for you to have the capacity to do the work. That is really what it's about. It's not like when you're talking about the presiding officers, where rank is really one of the prerequisites for that job. But when it comes to the principal officers, we talk about rank in terms of your capacity to do the work, and that is really an internal thing. So they have the capacity to do the work in terms of the minority. And as I've already said, in terms of the majority, Bamidele Okweyemi he's been in the House of Reps, and this is his second term as a senator, second consecutive term. Therefore, he's overqualified to be majority leader. And of course, Ali Ndume has been there. I think this is his 5th term in the Senate, consecutive term in the Senate. So he's really qualified, and so on and so forth. The only person there that is a new senator is the former governor of Ebonyi State, but he's only operating in the deputy capacity. And as a deputy leader, he will be able to quickly understudy what the leader is doing and what the others are doing and come up to speed. So I think I must congratulate the 10th Assembly. So far, so good.
Senator Bassi, okay, so let's step back a little bit. I mean, the emergence of the president of the Senate and his deputy was in line with the advice of the party, that's APC. Now, these other principal officers that were announced, of course, you've heard the reaction of the chairman of the party saying, hey, I wasn't carried along in this announcement, so to speak. What is obtainable normally? I mean, you've been there, you were in the 8th and you were in the 9th Assembly, so before you've been there, so to speak. So tell us, what would be the right or the normal process that should have happened before these announcements were made?
Well, like I have said, look, it's usually a handshake. The party and the parliamentary party work together, and these things happen. But the truth of the matter is that it is always the parliamentary party that takes the lead. But they work along with the party. And so I'm sure they'll resolve this internally. But I
Well,
think once the parliamentary party has
you see, this is where we need transparency in our governance. All of this should be open in the open for us to be able to see, so that people can judge. But it's when they're doing things in the dark and everything else, it usually means that they're separating, they are excluding the very people to whom sovereignty belongs. I will keep reminding you all. I know many of you are aware of what I do these days in terms of bringing information to yourselves. I always talk about Section 14(2)(a). Sovereignty belongs to the people of Nigeria, from whom the government, through this constitution, derives all its powers and authority. They derive powers from we, the citizens, collectively. We are the ultimate, power in the nation called Nigeria, and it's time we recognize that collectively. Secondly, we now use that power through active participation in our government. The participation of the people, Section 42C, the participation of the people in the government shall be in accordance with the provisions of this constitution. These are things that should impact everything they're doing at every point of the process that they're doing, nationally, National Assembly, whatever. They should always ensure that the people are involved in that process, because we are the ones with the ultimate sovereignty. But let's listen on.
Pronounced on this, there's very little that can be done except the parliamentary party itself changes its mind.
The parliamentary party being the members of the National Assembly.
Yes, being in the case of the Senate, being the senators. Except the senators change their minds. There's very little that an outsider, an external force can do.
So what happens here, in this case now, being that when there was that argument about who should occupy the position of the president of the Senate and the deputy, there was that argument. The party wanted wanted the current president of the Senate. But the senators themselves were asking for an opportunity to choose their own. Eventually, they went along with the party's advice, as I said earlier. But in this case, that is not working out that way. How do you think this relationship will go? I mean, unless, as you said, the Senate decides to change their mind. What would the relationship between the senators and their party be like?
Well, like I said, this is an internal problem for the APC, and I'm sure that they will find a way to resolve. I mean, we all know that the APC are the ruling party, so they have enough levers to press. I mean, of course, the number one person that can resolve this, if he so decides, is the president himself, president of the country, who is an APC member and former leader of the APC. So you have that lever, and you have other levers that they can press to resolve this issue. So I wouldn't put too much flesh. I mean, it's a I don't know. It's
okay. So for the opposition,
it's a normal political issue, and it will be resolved, I'm sure.
But for the opposition parties that you belong to the PDP, and one would think that the opposition will be happy that now the APC's ranks are sort of like not exactly in disarray, but in somewhat of a disarray. One would think that the opposition parties will be happy, and now we have room and we have inroads into this structure as it is. Is that working out for you and your party?
No, I think I haven't consulted or spoken to anybody in my party. But I think before I'm a party member, I'm in Nigeria. And the most important thing is that Nigeria is at a crossroads right now. And the most important thing is for Nigeria's institutions of power to be working optimally. That is the most important thing. And so I don't think we should be playing politics with this type of situation. The most important, I think we want our Senate and our National Assembly to be functioning optimally so that they can complement whatever it is the executive is doing. And
talking about, if I may come in here, talking about the institutions and how they function optimally, the amended constitution gives the president 60 days to submit his list. If I stand to be corrected, about 60 days ago, submit a list of those for nomination into the office of ministers and all of that. Do you think the legislators are ready to get this done? I mean, as soon as they were inaugurated, they took 2 weeks off, which is a normal thing for them to settle in. But they are back now. What are the things you think they should be looking at that really get things going real quick to get Nigeria?
Oil refinery. the question that it should be fixing of the oil refinery immediately. But let us hear what he will say. I bet you it is not going to be one of the first things on his lips. Listen, and this is why you need to exercise these powers. When you hear his answers, you will know that it is left to us, the citizens, to impose upon those we elect into office what we need them to tell the National Assembly and the State of Assembly about the need for the oil refineries to be fixed urgently. But let's listen to what he has to say. Let's listen.
Off the ground where it's been, especially as regards the economy?
Well, you've asked several questions there all in one.
Yeah.
If we talk about the functioning of the Senate itself, there are certain committees that have to be formed immediately. Those are, I think, within 14 days, you have to form those committees. Public accounts, legislative compliance, and so on and so forth. There are a number of very key committees. So that's the next item on the agenda. After that, of course, all the other committees have to be constituted. But in terms of, you were asking about the ministerial list. I'm sure, there's not.
You see, everything is said. Okay, fine. You can sort of talk about setting out the committees and all of that. But uppermost are the concerns of the people, the petrol, the fact that our refineries are not working. But notice he didn't mention that. And they are all in this same thing. And until we, the citizens, actively participate and direct them, we tell them, we call them to town hall meetings across all local government areas. Call them to town hall meetings and instruct them that we, the citizens, we demand that you go back to the State House of Assembly and the National Assembly and ensure a law is passed to compel the government to fix the refineries as a matter of urgency. Those are the powers we possess there. Sovereignty belongs to the people of Nigeria, to whom the government, sovereignty belongs to the people of Nigeria, from whom the government, through this constitution, derives all its powers and authority. And of course, the participation of the people in the government shall be in accordance with the provisions of this constitution. Those are two powers that we must begin to use actively in all 774 local government areas. This is what I'm here to tell you. Without us actively getting involved in this process, the refineries will not be functioning. It will never function. And that is what we need to change. So let us go ahead.
I think the work is quite straightforward. So I think that as soon as I was a member of the Constitution Review Committee that made those amendments to the Constitution and brought in the 60-day rule so that we do not delay the country unduly in terms of formation of government. So I'm sure that as soon as the president sends his list to the Senate will be ready. And normally those confirmations and those things are done in the committee of the whole. They're not sent to the subcommittees. So even though there may be no committees, the full complement of committees may not be available. You'll find that because it is a committee of the whole, the entire Senate will be able to sit down and clear those ministers if they so find them fit.
So, Senator, the numbers in the Senate, those who belong to different parties, yes, we see that the APC does have 59 members, but all the other opposition put together, about 50 of them. Do these numbers, do they count for something on the floor when you get in for deliberations and such things? Because, yes, they've also announced the principal officers, but how do these numbers usually play out, and in what circumstances could they be useful?
Well, normally numbers count when it comes to voting. And as you know, there are certain thresholds for voting. In some instances, you require a simple majority. For instance, if you're clearing ministers, they could take a voice vote and do a simple majority. But in other instances, for instance, in a constitutional amendment, there may be some amendments that require certain thresholds, like 2/3 and so on, where you need to call for a division in the chambers. So that is where numbers become important. Or, for instance, if you're talking about impeachment, in impeachment, there are certain thresholds if you want to impeach certain officers. both in the executive and even in the legislature. So in those circumstances, numbers become extremely important. But in terms of debate, usually the Senate President will call senators that are interested in contributing. So it's numbers now become less important because you are contributing as a senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And if you have something to say, usually the Senate President will allow you to say it. And so, of course, in terms of Senate committees, you would have thought that committees will be shared almost along the lines of at least the ruling party will probably have more committees than the opposition parties because they are more. And that is more of an arithmetic thing than any other thing. So, I think that normally the numbers account or are very important when it comes to issues of voting.
For these principal officers who have been announced, because yes, we usually see lots of contestations for those positions, how they earnestly want to occupy those seats. So does it really affect their constituencies? Of what benefit is it if they have to make laws and impact on those who elected them?
Well, the principal officers, first and foremost, most of them are members of the selection committee, which is probably the next committee that will be constituted. It's one of those key committees that must be constituted within 14 days, what is called the selection committee. The selection committee is the committee that constitutes all the other committees, and it's usually made up of the principal officers. Now,
see, this is quite involved.
If you are a principal officer from Cross River State, my state, and you are in the selection committee, then you will have an influence, or you'll have influence when it comes to determining which committee comes to your state. You will have that, and and you'll have influence in determining committees that go to other states as well. So principal officers can be important in that regard. Although normally there's a formula, they try to be fair to all states and try to be fair to all persons. But then you can have 3 committees in Cross River State and 3 committees in, say, Bayelsa State. But the 3 committees will not be carried, at least to the normal person. Those 3 committees may not carry the same weight. Some committees will be heavier than others. So, you can have influence in terms of that. You can also have influence in terms of influencing other things that may come to the Senate. But generally, those things are because what the leadership tries to do is to be fair-minded, and so that influence can be a bit.
What I meant to say was my central point is remains this.
Senator Bassi,
my central point remains
from Lagos.
The
list is interesting, no doubt.
My central point here, and what I really urge us, please, if you're watching this and you are not already, taking cognizance of the things I'm saying now in terms of those 2 powers, 14.2 and 14.2c, and begin to really make sure that your communities are aware of it in your local government areas. That's a real problem because that's where the power lies. The power lies with us, but we don't know it. They've used religions and everything else to close our minds from knowing the power we possess and how we can hold them to account. We must hold them to account. So everything they're doing now is just to try and occupy our mind, our space. Oh, they're doing this on our behalf. No, it's all to cement the total dominance and preventing us from exercising our sovereignty to ensure that we get the infrastructure that we need in our community. So anyway, I'm probably going to not listen to too much more of this because it's all about machinations and trying to divert attention from what really needs to be done, i.e. fixing our refineries. Because you notice they're not talking about that.
You've been in the Senate before. I'd like you to give us an aerial view, particularly with regards to what political undertones may have been responsible, particularly for the emergence of a particular name in the list, as Senator Dave Umahi, who is a former governor of a southeast state. There are other names there, that could have, taking the position of deputy majority leader. Senator Ali Ndume, for instance, he's a long-time senator, fifth time, as you rightly observed. And there are other senators as well who are experienced parliamentarians, Senator Ningi, Senator Dixon. So what could have been responsible for, the decision of the leadership of the Senate to pick Senator Dave Umahi as deputy majority leader?
Well, I'm not inside the Senate and I'm not part of the APC caucus, but I can hazard a guess. And normally you would say, first of all, David Umahi was the chairman of the Gospel Akpabio campaign for Senate President, so that gives him some consideration. Of course, the second thing is that he's from the Southeast, and the issue of spread is also very important. And then the third thing is that he's coming in a deputy position, So for a person like Ali Ndume, who I think he was also co-chairman along with David Umahi, I want to believe that he had an option on what he wanted. You remember that Ali Ndume was leader of the Senate in the 8th Assembly, so he has already been a leader, and so he chief whip is a substantive position. So maybe that was his thinking. The other thing you talked about regards other high-ranking senators who are not in the leadership. It's an option. You could be offered minority leader, you could be offered chief whip, but it's up to you. You may say, no, I prefer to be chairman of the committee. I don't want to be in leadership. That's your prerogative. So it's not that when you are, it's not, there's always a give and take and always a discussion. And I know that in my experience, a number of people have opted out of leadership and said, look, they don't want to be in leadership. They prefer to be committee chairman. So that's the way it goes.
But you know that the National Assembly as a whole places premium on the ranking principle. How will this go down well? Will this go down well with other senators who consider themselves ranking and more deserving of leadership positions, in the principal capacity, rather than a first-time senator?
No, look, Senator Godswill Akpabio was our minority leader in the 8th Assembly. And yet there were other more ranking senators, people who had been there, James Manager, George Thompson, Sikibo, also other high-ranking members of the 8th Assembly from the zone that the minority leadership was zoned to. But we opted to go with all of them. Opted to go with Godswill Akpabio. So it's not unusual to have high-ranking senators or back or support newly ranked or newly ranked or lower ranked, no, not lower ranked, but less ranked senators. So it's a normal thing. They will accept it. They will be happy with it if they were consulted and they were carried along, and the business of the Senate will continue.
I wonder if you saw the papers today. Some couched the headlines to suggest that the Senate leadership went with Wike's men. In fact, the House of Reps leadership specifically went with former Governor Wike's men. And there is this concern that the governor is heart and soul with the ruling party. And as such, his men who have been picked will not offer that much needed opposition to the leadership of the House. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, the whole concept of offering opposition, I've always found it to be more of I think, playing to the gallery. The whole idea that just because you're in another party, you must always be opposing what the ruling party does. I find that a bit. I think that the overriding concern must be the interest of the country. And if issues come to the Senate and they are in the best interest of the country, then there is no reason why the so-called opposition should not go along with it. However, if they see contributions they can make to enrich those issues, or they can make contributions that can ensure that those issues, or they're totally, those issues they feel are not in the best interest of the country, then they can come up and say, look, we don't agree with this. So I'm a bit careful when it comes to this concept of opposing everything that comes from the executive or comes from anywhere. That's the first thing. The second question that you asked, the second issue that you raised, which is the Wike issue. I don't know. I know that the fellow in the House of Reps
you can
had
see
contested
that
for,
all of this
I think
it's
minority leader
all
in the
designed
Ninth
to
Assembly,
occupy.
and he was not successful.
All what you're hearing is all designed to occupy the minds of the people. And they're not really taking action on the concerns of the people. They're just trying to occupy your mind with nonsense. The refinery, which I'm going to show you again, those refineries must be top priority. I'm bringing in this in so that we all begin to know that it is our duty as citizens to collectively put pressure on these people. Their positions and all that is that they're just always arguing, struggling for positions, and using that to try and take our mind away from what their real job should be, to ensure that there should be no excuses. As a nation, third largest oil producing country in the entire world, we should have our own functioning refineries. No ifs, no buts. And that is what we need to put our efforts to. So familiarize yourself with the powers that I'm showing you on the screen, and be actively participating in your local government authority and area right now. Begin to come together as a group collectively to demand for those refineries to be put to work immediately. No ifs, no buts, no excuses. That must be our daily activity that we must do, because without that, it is impacting the lives of our people on a daily basis. So everything they're doing here is all a smoke screen. But let's carry on and watch. I'm just showing you how much time they're
having
wasting.
Come back in the 10th Assembly, maybe he still had the ambition to be a minority leader, and therefore it was natural that he would contest. That's the way I see it. So I'm not sure about which factor is which. In the Senate, like I have said, they had a closed door session before coming out with that list. And therefore, I want to believe that that closed door session must have resolved a lot of issues, and that fundamentally, the leadership that emerged must have been the choice of the minority senators. Otherwise, we would have seen a lot of pushback or blowback. So far, I've not seen much blowback from the minority senators. So, yeah, that's the way I see it.
Well, Senator Bassi, I mean, it's interesting. One of the things that comes to me, and I don't know how you see it, you may want to respond to it, that once a senator, always a senator. I mean, if you are a journalist and you can always go back. I don't know if you can say the same thing for a senator. You can always go back if you want to, but you may want to respond to that just on the comic side. But, you know, the one that interests me is something that you said repeatedly, the ruling party, the ruling party, the ruling party. Now, there are those who will be wondering whether or not the Fourth Republic has really been able to make as prominent as expected the role of the party in making decisions for the country. I always go back to the previous republics, particularly the first three republics that we've had. The party supremacy was very strong, such that it's the policies or the initiatives or the manifestos or the plans of the party, the programs of the party.
They've not achieved anything for the citizens. The Fourth Republic, what have they achieved? If they've achieved anything, we would be having infrastructure in place now. They haven't. They are just rubber stamp assemblies. That's what they are. And republics, the people who populated the assemblies in those republics, they are rubber stamp. So the republic has not achieved anything, in my opinion. What say you, citizens watching? Let's go back. I didn't mean to do that. I meant to bet this one. That's the one. But let's carry on.
Party that the elected officials always play up. In the First Republic, in the Second Republic, even in the Third Republic, it was so, although botched at some point. So, but what we have in recent time is perhaps one of the reasons a number of people are saying, how come the leadership of the leadership of the National Assembly is not going by the dictates of the ruling party in this? Do you see that as something significant in our polity generally, irrespective of whichever political party it is, at the federal or state level, where the position of the political party upon which platform they got into office may not be as strong or solid as that of the individuals who are elected into power?
Well, if I understand what you're asking, you're talking about, like you say, party supremacy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that once you're elected, first of all, parties should be encouraged to have manifestos. And those manifestos give a broad general outline of what they intend to do. Now, what they intend to do and what they find when they get into office, I'm talking about the executive now, even the legislature, may be two different things. You may believe that the debt of the country is X, but when you get into office, you find that it is X, 3X or 4X when you get into office. So, and you must govern. So, the most important thing is the country. Once you are elected, the most important thing is the country, or the state, or wherever it is, or local government, or wherever it is you're elected to serve. That is the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. Now I can agree with you.
Party manifesto and even the party...
I agree with you on that. I agree. The constituency that you are elected for, be it from federal and the nation, the state, or the local government area, that are the most important. And that's why I keep telling you that we possess this power and we need to use those powers at all times.
The party interest should be secondary.
But doesn't that also raise an issue, Senator Bassi? Because if the political party that is seeking a job, because that's the way it should be, the political party is a platform seeking a job to make a country or a state better. So if the political party is not aware of the issues they're going to tackle when they get the job, why should they be taken seriously? So it begs the question of whether or not there are some things that need to be readjusted in the polity. So whatever policies come up.
You know what is really painful? Let me get you that thing. I want you to, you need to, as you're watching this, I want you to take action on this as well. Because the idea of when I do broadcast is not just to watch and just parabolate about what is being discussed. What is the central issue impacting our lives today is what I want us all to be thinking about on a daily basis, because it requires us to now act on that. Active participation in our governance. And that's why this issue of the refinery is so much important. A minute, please. One minute, please. That should be the priority. Top priority. Operation Fix the Refineries. That is what we need to be talking about, because it is impacting the lives of our people on a daily basis. All of this talk about party inter-party machinations and all of that stuff is all designed to distract you from the central issue impacting the lives of millions of people. He was right. The most important people in all of this are the citizens, not the people elected. The elected are meant to serve the citizens, and I'm here to remind you that when we're talking about this, and I'm bringing this to you, is to make you also be willing to take active participation collectively to improve your lives. Without that central ingredient, no infrastructure will take place. Let's listen on.
With by a political party should be good enough for the country. Otherwise, why stick the job?
No. Look, let me give you a very clear example that all of us have experienced. COVID. COVID was in nobody's political manifesto. It was not in anybody's political agenda. But COVID happened. And we, especially us in the Ninth Assembly and the last government, had to react to COVID. And of course, we reacted by providing budgetary funding and all that. But these were outliers. These were events that we did not, nobody could have included in any manifesto. So that's why I'm saying that once you are in government and once there is governance, then you have to govern. You cannot now start talking about, your manifesto is in the background. It gives you a general compass. It's a general compass, as it were. But in terms of governing, you must deal with the realities of ground. And so I think that political parties need to understand that as they go along. The idea that the political party will dictate to the government doesn't make sense to me. And I don't think it is practiced like that.
That's one of the reasons why they do that. The government are actually behind encouraging their party to dictate what they're going to do. And all the while, they are suppressing and indeed preventing them. They are using it as an excuse to be inactive, to be unwilling to take the necessary actions, such as fixing of the refineries top priority. That's what I'm here to remind you about. And it requires us to use the powers you see on the screen, the two. I'll read it again. Section 14.2a. Sovereignty belongs to the people of Nigeria, from whom the government, through this constitution, derives all its powers and authority. 14.2a. 14.2c. The participation by the people in their government shall be in accordance with the provisions of this constitution. These are key things that we must memorize, understand, and be willing to actively use on a daily basis to ensure that our refineries are fixed. Our economy is being hit daily by importing oil and processed oil that we could have processed ourselves, creating jobs and bringing the price of oil down for citizens and our communities to benefit from. And these are the things that what they are doing in terms of discussing about, the government is being dictated to by the party, and is all distraction. You need to keep your focus and your eye on ensuring that those refineries are working, and we must come together as a community to impose upon the House of Assemblies and the National Assembly that we, the citizens, to whom sovereignty belongs, we demand and we instruct them to ensure that there is a law put in place to compel the government to fix the refineries with immediate effect and with proper monitoring. That's my take. But let's carry on and listen.
In other territories around the world, other jurisdictions.
Senator, I mean, you spoke about you being in that committee that adjusted the requirements, the timeline within which the president has got to send a list of his ministerial nominees. Well, hopefully that might even happen next week. Who knows? But are they, or will he, or will the Senate, or should the Senate expect that he will attach portfolios to those names when he sends them to them?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
All right. He is not required to attach portfolios. That is for sure. Because of the obvious reason, which is that portfolios can change. So he's not required to attach portfolios. But I think that I agree to a large extent with the argument that attaching portfolios, at least initial portfolios, to the names will make the job of the senators better or easier or more effective. Because if you say that Mr. A is going to be Attorney General, for instance, then we are able to have a more useful engagement when we engage with him in the clearing. If you say somebody is going to be Minister of Works, you can really engage with him on issues that will eventually come up when it comes to, say, budget defense and all that. You can engage with him and get his mindset on key issues that have. So I think yes, you're not required to, but personally, I would like a situation where the president can attach the initial portfolios of these nominees as he sends the names to the Senate. It would be a more useful engagement for the Senate.
All right, Senator Gershom Bassey, member of the 8th and 9th Senate. Thank you very much indeed for your time here this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
So, that was a former senator talking about, political parties, nominations and committees and interaction between the parties and the government and how the parties are trying to impose their will on the government. All of this is all designed to ensure that the government is saying, we're working for you, but we have to listen to what the party says. No. The most important priority is what the people want. And what the people want is to fix the refineries. And I'm here to remind you that you can use the powers that you see on the screen above me to ensure that you actually achieve the fixing of the refineries. That is what must be done. All of us must come together in the end. We must not allow the political process and the machinations to distract us from the main goal, which is to ensure that those refineries, Warri, Kaduna, 2 in Port Harcourt, that they are fixed, the oil refineries to process our oils in our own land. They are fixed, and furthermore, they must put meter on the remaining 16 terminals. Out of the 36, 20 have got meters. The 16 terminals are not metered. That means oil is going missing. We must compel them to do that because it is in our interest to do so as citizens. Because without that, we will not be able to track what is going out and where the oil is going, and it impacts our daily lives in terms of not having infrastructure, not having good jobs, and all of that, and so on and so forth. So please, those of you watching, the top priority remains how we are going to impose upon the federal government to fix the refineries. And using the powers that I quote, and I'm going to quote it again. Sovereignty, 14.2a, sovereignty belongs to the people of Nigeria, from whom the government, through this constitution, derives all its powers and authority. 14.2a. 14.2c, how you use that power. The participation by the people in the government shall be in accordance with the provisions of this constitution. Now, the provisions of the constitution goes back to 14.2a, which means that you have the ultimate sovereignty. Collectively, as citizens in all 774 local government areas, it is time we begin to use that. That is how we can actively participate in our governance and ensure that the things that we need to be functioning, such as our refineries, we put pressure on all of the elected officials, telling them, instructing them to go back to the House of Assemblies and the National Assembly and put a law that will compel the federal government to immediately fix the refineries, because that is the will of the people as expressed via the sovereignty they possess. Are you following? I hope this makes sense. Leave a comment, let's hear from you. You're, of course, watching Citizen AY, the platform where we speak truth to power. The song behind is How Long Are We Going to Suffer? Type it into Spotify, iTunes, download it. Help us. By doing that, you will help Citizen AY grow this platform and reach more people, because it's to really wake the people up. And there are a lot of things that we will come and talk about, but I hope you found this. I know it's been a long video, but it is worth going through this process to talk about this at length. You're watching Citizen AY, the platform where we speak truth to power. Don't forget to go ahead and subscribe, hit notification button, and of course give us a thumbs up. Help us grow Citizen AY, the platform where we speak truth to power. Subscribe. So subscribe, hit the notification button, give us the thumbs up. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to share this broadcast and leave a comment. Let's hear from you. Remember, our top priority to ease the lives of our people is to get those refineries fixed. And then there will be other things we need to talk about in terms of other issues and how we can get around it. But centrally, let's get those refineries fixed. Because at least for the next 10 years, we will still be using oil. I believe so. For that reason, it's in our interest to fix it in the short term, at least, to ensure that they can maximize the production and save us in terms of foreign reserves, and not have to waste our money on a process that doesn't need to involve foreigners. We're wasting our money. We are wasting our money importing oil that we can process in our own land. It doesn't make economic sense. So this is a top priority we need to all be involved in. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're of course watching Citizen Network, the platform where we speak to the power. When you get the broadcast, please share, leave a comment, and let's hear from you. Thank you very much, and bye for now. Bye for now.